My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 25 years old. And last Saturday night, my parents invited me home for what they called a family dinner. The kind of invite that sounds warm and normal until you're standing in your childhood living room staring at a marriage contract with a stranger's name on it, a man I had never spoken to in my entire life. There was an officiant sitting in the corner of the room like a piece of furniture nobody wanted to talk about. My dad, Raymond, was leaning against the front door with his arms crossed the way he used to when I missed curfew at 16. My mom, Patricia, was looking at me with this calm, settled expression, the look of someone who has already finished a puzzle and is just waiting for you to notice. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't even really looking at me. She was looking through me like I was a checkbox she was finally about to mark. And honestly, she thought she had it figured out. She really did. Every single move had been planned. Every single person in that room had been placed there by her hand. She just forgot to account for me. Before I keep going, if this story is touching something real inside you right now, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely want to. And if you're listening to this late at night, drop a comment and tell me where you are and what time it is. I'm always curious who's awake with me when I tell this story. Now let me take you back. Not to that Saturday. To the phone call that changed the whole game, just a few days before all of this went down. First, let me tell you who I was before all of this. Or who I thought I was anyway. I live alone in a small apartment about 30 minutes outside of Mill Haven, Tennessee. I've been on my own for 3 years, working as an office coordinator at a small animal rescue organization. I pay my bills on time. I don't make a lot of noise. Keep to myself, keep my space clean, keep my cat fed. By every standard that matters to me, my life is mine. Small, quiet, honest, and mine. But to my mother, Patricia Bennett, quiet and mine is just a prettier way to say failure. She calls me at least 4 times a week. Not to ask how I'm doing, not to catch up, to check. Where was I last weekend? Why haven't I been going to church? Why am I still working at that little rescue place instead of doing something that looks better at family dinners? And always, always the big one, you're 25 and still alone, Clara. Do you know what people are starting to say? I stopped picking up most of her calls about a year ago. That made things worse. Last Easter, I drove 40 minutes to their house because she guilt-tripped me for a full week straight. I walked through the front door with a pan of sweet potato casserole in my hands, and before I could even set it on the counter, she turned to one of my cousins and said, "I remember this word for word. This is Clara. Still single. Still working at the dog place." Then she laughed. Like it was a joke everyone was supposed to already know. My dad, Raymond, was sitting at the head of the table. He said nothing. He never does. He just gave this slow, heavy nod. Kind that says I agree with all of this, but I'm too tired to participate. His silence has always done more damage than her words ever could. I was 22 when I first wrote it down in a notebook. Not a journal, not a diary. Just a plain navy blue notebook I bought at a drugstore. I didn't have a plan for it yet. I just knew I needed somewhere to put all the things I was starting to feel, to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining them. It was a Tuesday afternoon at work when my phone buzzed and I saw the name, Uncle Marcus. He never calls during business hours. I stepped outside and leaned against the brick wall near the parking lot. The sun was going down and the air smelled like pine and motor oil from the repair shop next door. "Clara." His voice was rough, trained, like he'd been rehearsing what to say and still wasn't sure he had the words right. "I need you to listen to me all the way through before you say anything." I said okay. "Your mama called me this morning. She was excited, Clara. Bragging, even." He paused. "She said this coming Saturday they're having a dinner at the house. She said they've finally figured out how to handle the Clara situation." I said his name 3 times. Marcus. 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 Like saying it enough times would make what came next make sense. "There's a man. His name is Terrence Hobbs. He's 41. There's an officiant coming and there's a contract. A marriage contract, Clara. Pre-signed by your parents. The air left my lungs. Terrence's family owns a whole lot of land out past Highway 7. And your daddy owes them money. The lot of money. Marcus stopped. She wanted me to come and witness it. Watch my niece finally do the right thing. He paused again, longer this time. I told her I was busy. But I'm not letting you walk into that house blind. Then, right before he hung up, quiet and steady like he'd been holding on to it for years. You don't owe them your whole life, Clara. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time after we hung up. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but not from fear, not exactly. It was something closer to recognition. Like every weird phone call, every guilt trip, every slammed door and heavy silence over the past 3 years had suddenly assembled themselves into a shape I could finally see clearly. A pattern. A plan. I had about 4 days. And I was done being good. On the drive home that night, I ran every scenario in my head. If I didn't show up, my mom would call every relative in 2 states and tell them I'd abandoned the family. She'd call her prayer group. She'd call her walking club. She'd build a version of the story where she was the heartbroken mother and I was the unstable daughter who'd lost her mind. In Millhaven, Tennessee, once you become the villain of someone else's story, that story follows you everywhere. Small towns don't forget. They just stop saying it out loud. If I showed up and flat out refused, my dad would block the door. I knew that for a fact because he'd done it 3 years ago when I packed a bag and told them I was moving out. He stood in the doorway with his arms folded and said 5 words, "You walk out, don't come back." I walked anyway. But that night there was no contract. No stranger in a sport coat. No officiant with a leather folder. And if I showed up and signed, I'd lose everything I'd built. The apartment, the job, the 3 years of learning what it feels like when silence is something you choose instead of something that's forced on you. I pulled into my parking spot and sat in the dark. Then I thought about the notebook. I went inside, pulled it out of my nightstand, and opened it. Navy blue cover, dog-eared corners. Over 200 entries spread across 3 years. I flipped through slowly. November 2nd, 2 years ago. The mom called at midnight and said if I didn't come home for Thanksgiving, she'd tell Grandma Rose I was living with a boyfriend. I live alone. February 14th last year. Dad texted 1 single period. Just a dot. I called back and he hung up after 8 seconds. August 6th, Mom told Aunt Sharon I'd been let go from my job. I hadn't been. She just doesn't consider what I do real work. Entry after entry. Dates. Direct quotes. Screenshots taped to pages with Scotch tape. I'd kept all of it because I thought I was losing my mind. I needed proof for myself that what I was experiencing was real. What I didn't know yet was that that notebook was about to become something else entirely. I called my best friend Simone at 11 that night. Simone and I grew up together. She went to law school, works now at a civil rights firm in the next county over. She picked up on the first ring. I told her everything. Call from Marcus, the dinner, the contract, Terrence Hobbs, the officiant. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Clara, this isn't just family drama. What you're describing is a pattern of control, using fear, guilt, and pressure to make you do what they want. And Tennessee law has a process for this." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared. Because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't just documenting what was happening to me. I was deciding what I was going to do about it. Friday morning, I called my supervisor and took a personal day. By 8:30, I was in my car driving 40 minutes to the county courthouse. Simone was already in the lobby when I got there. She had a clipboard ready and a coffee waiting for me. "I prepped the forms last night," she said. "Emergency protective order application. You write the narrative. I'll walk you through every line." I sat at a metal table in the courthouse hallway and I wrote. Not the whole notebook, just the pattern. 3 years of calls. The guilt. The isolation. The time my dad physically blocked the exit when I tried to leave. What Marcus had told me was planned for tomorrow night. I attached photocopies of 48 notebook pages and 17 screenshots. By 10 in the morning, a duty judge reviewed the application. By 11, she signed it. I held the paper in both hands and read my name, my parents' names, 500 feet, effective immediately. Then Simone handed me a second form. Adult Protective Services complaint, she said. This documents the pattern, years of pressure, guilt, and control. It triggers a formal investigation. I signed it. She filed it electronically while I sat in the passenger seat. Then she made one more call to dispatch. She gave them the address on Harrow Lane, my parents' house, and explained that I'd be there that evening, that a protective order was in effect, and that I might need assistance. At 6:45 that evening, I pulled up to the curb outside my childhood home. Porch light on. Mom's car in the driveway. A dark SUV I didn't recognize parked behind it. I turned on the voice recorder on my phone, slipped it into my purse, and took a slow breath. For the first time in my life, I was not scared to walk into that house. The front door was unlocked. Mom never leaves the door unlocked. I stepped inside and stopped. White tablecloth over the dining table. Fresh flowers in a vase I'd never seen before. Candles, real ones, lit along the fireplace mantel. The whole room smelled like gardenias and floor cleaner. The smell she only brings out when she's trying to impress someone. This was not a family dinner. A man stood up from the couch. Tall gray sport coat over a pressed blue shirt, clean-shaven, somewhere in his early 40s. He looked at me and gave this single measured nod, like we'd already agreed on something. I had never seen this person in my life. In the corner near the bookshelf sat another man, older, maybe early 60s, holding a leather folder on his lap and wearing a suit that was just slightly too big. He smiled at me the way people smile at nervous brides. Marcus had described every single detail. The man on the couch. The officiant in the corner. Even where they'd be sitting. My mother came in from the kitchen wiping her hands on a dish towel. There she is. Come on in, sweetheart. Everyone's been waiting. She said it like I was late to my own surprise party. I looked at the couch. The officiant. The white tablecloth. Candles. The empty chair across from the man I'd never met, with a pen placed neatly beside the plate like a prop. No food. No dinner at all. Just a stage. Then I heard the deadbolt click behind me. I turned around. My dad, Raymond, was standing at the front door. Arms folded across his chest. Back against the frame. Eyes flat. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Before I could sit, my mother slid a stack of papers across the table toward me. 6 pages stapled in the corner. Blue ink. I looked down at the header. Marital Agreement and Covenant of Union. Page 3 had 2 signatures at the bottom. Raymond A. Bennett. Patricia M. Bennett. Under a line that said, Parental Consent and Endorsement. My name was already typed into every single blank. Clara Marie Bennett, printed neatly like a form letter. Like I was a box someone had already checked. What is this? Mom folded her hands on the table. Your future? Who signed this? Your father and I did. Because you won't do it yourself. I've never met this person. You're meeting him right now. Sit down. The man from the couch stepped forward and extended his hand. I didn't take it. I'm Terrence Hobbs, he said. His voice was flat. Not nervous, not warm. Cold and businesslike, like he was closing on a piece of real estate and just needed the paperwork finished. I think you'll find the terms very reasonable. I looked at the officiant. He shifted the folder in his lap and looked everywhere except at me. Then something in the contract caught my eye. Clause buried in the middle of page 4. I held it. Didn't react. Not yet. Terrence's family has been very patient, Mom said, touching my arm. Very generous. Terrence checked his watch. And in that exact moment, I understood something I hadn't fully grasped until right then. He wasn't here because he wanted a wife. He was here because he was collecting on a debt, and I was the payment. I looked at the pen beside my plate. Looked at the blank signature line with my name already typed underneath it. I didn't pick it up. I set the contract down, stood up slowly, and pushed back my chair. I'm not signing this. Mom's smile stayed perfectly still. You haven't finished reading it. I don't need to finish reading it. I don't agree to this. I turned toward the front door. 2 steps. 3. Dad was already there. Same posture as 3 years ago. Back flat against the door. Arms folded. Chin down. A wall made of flannel and quiet stubbornness. I stopped 2 feet away from him. Close enough to smell the pine sap that never fully washes out of his work jacket. Dad. Move. Nothing. Dad. Move. His eyes flicked over my shoulder toward my mother, then came back to me. He didn't unfold his arms. Didn't shift his weight. Just stood there, solid, the way he'd stood in every doorway of every decision I'd ever tried to make in my entire life. Behind me, my mother's voice. You're not going anywhere tonight, Clara. The officiant coughed softly. Terrence sat back down and crossed one leg over the other like a man with all the time in the world. 3 years ago, this exact scene broke me. Dad in the doorway. Mom narrating my failure. Me caught in the middle with nowhere to go. I cried and I pushed past him and I left, and I didn't speak to either of them for months after that. But tonight was different. I breathed in, turned around, walked back to the table, and sat down. Not because I had given up. Mom's eyes lit up the second she saw me sit down. She thought she'd won. She hadn't. Mom sat across from me and reached for my hands. I let her take them. Took everything I had not to pull away. Clara! Her voice went soft. The sympathy voice. The one she'd been sharpening for 25 years. I carried you. I raised you. I gave up everything, my career, my social life, my freedom. And all I'm asking, the one thing I have ever asked, is that you let me hold my head up in this town. A single tear ran down her cheek. Right on cue. I watched the officiant shift in his chair. He looked uncomfortable. Good. He should. Terrence didn't even glance at the tears. He looked at his watch again. Tears weren't for him. They weren't really for me either. They were a performance, designed specifically for the man in the corner with the leather folder. A way to keep him in his seat a little longer. Mom, I said. Don't you mom me. Her voice went hard and flat. Not tonight. I looked at the contract. The pen. At the candles burning on the mantel. Then I looked at my mother, really looked, and I recognized the whole pattern. Tears. Guilt. Command. Tears. Guilt. Command. She'd done it when I wanted to go to college 2 states away. When I wanted to move out. When I wanted to stop answering every single call. 3 years ago, this room would have crushed me. Tonight, it just confirmed every entry in that notebook. I picked up the contract. Mom stopped crying immediately. Her eyes went bright. But I didn't reach for the pen. I turned instead to the man in the corner. Excuse me. My voice was steady. I was genuinely surprised by that. May I ask you something? The officiant straightened up. Of course. When were you contacted about tonight's ceremony and by whom? He blinked. Mrs. Bennett reached out to me last week. She said both parties had already consented. Tonight is the first time I've heard about this marriage, I said. The first time I've met Mr. Hobbs. And the first time I've seen this contract. I held it up so he could see clearly. My name was filled in without my knowledge or consent. The room went quiet. Not comfortable quiet. Kind of quiet where everyone is calculating their next move at the same time. The officiant, I'd find out later his name was Earl Dutton, 63 years old, licensed by the county, looked at my mother. His polite smile was completely gone. "Mrs. Bennett, you told me both parties had." "She's nervous," Mom said quickly. "Pre-wedding jitters. You know how young women are." "I'm not nervous," I said. "I'm telling you the facts." Earl looked at the contract in my hands. Then at the door where Raymond was standing. Then back at me. I leaned forward slightly. "You understand that under Tennessee law, a marriage ceremony performed without the full, free agreement of both adult parties is void. And the officiant who performs it can face criminal charges." I watched the color drain from Earl Dutton's face one shade at a time. Mom laughed, but it was a thin laugh stretched tight. "Clara, stop with the dramatics." But Earl wasn't laughing. And he wasn't sitting comfortably anymore. Something shifted in that room. I could feel it like a current changing direction. Earl moved to stand. Mom's hand shot out. "Sit down." Her voice dropped the warmth completely, like a mask hitting a hardwood floor. She turned to me, and for the first time that night I saw the real Patricia Bennett. Not the crying mother. Not the gracious hostess. Controller. Clara Marie Bennett. "I am not asking your opinion. I am telling you what is going to happen." From the door, my father spoke for the first time. 2 words. Heavy as concrete. "Listen to your mother." Mom turned to Earl. "You do your job. I've already paid you." Earl froze halfway between sitting and standing, hand on the armrest. Terrence's calm cracked just enough to show what was underneath. "I didn't drive 45 minutes for a debate," he said. "Are we doing this or not?" I looked at him directly. "Are you asking me or asking them? Because from where I'm sitting, you've been negotiating with my parents this whole time, not with me." Terrence's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Raymond. I felt my purse against my hip. Inside, folded in a plain white envelope, was something none of them had any idea existed. My hand drifted to the strap, then I pulled it back. Not yet. I checked the microwave clock through the kitchen doorway. 7:41 p.m. My phone buzzed inside my purse. Once, then twice. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. Simone had said she'd text when dispatch confirmed. Mom was still talking. Something about Terrence's family, their land holdings, how well connected they were out past Highway 7. I caught every third word. The rest was noise. "Clara." Mom's voice sharpened. "Are you even listening to me?" "Every word." She leaned across the table. Her perfume, that heavy vanilla she's worn since I was 10 years old, filled the air between us. "You have 2 choices, Clara. You sign this contract or you never call me Mom again." I heard it. Really heard it. And something strange happened. I felt lighter. Like she'd just unlocked a door she meant to seal shut forever. She'd given me permission to leave. I looked around the room one more time. Dad at the door, arms still folded. Mom jaw tight, red-faced. Terrence on the couch, patient the way buyers are patient when they think a deal is already closed. Earl in the corner looking like a man who desperately wished he'd stayed home. I slid my phone out just far enough to see the screen. Simone's message, confirmed with dispatch. "Send the word anytime." I typed one word with my thumb without looking down. I practiced it in the car on the drive over. Muscle memory by now. I placed the phone back in my purse and looked up. And I smiled. Not the small, apologetic smile I'd spent my whole life perfecting. Not the nervous smile that says please don't be upset. A real one. Calm and clear, the smile of someone who knows exactly what's about to happen. Mom noticed. Her eyes narrowed. "What's so funny?" Nothing is funny, Mom. Not a single thing. Picked up the contract again, slowly, page by page. Since we're all here, I said, let me share what I found. Mom straightened. She thought I was finally coming around. I turned to page 2, section 3. Sets of the bride. Someone had listed my savings account balance. $11,200. I looked up. I've never shared that number with anyone in this room. Silence. Page 4. Section 7. Marital residence. The Hobbs property on Highway 7. No alternative listed. No option for independent housing. Terrence uncrossed his legs. Page 5. Section 9. I read it slowly, making sure every single word landed. The bride agrees to give up her job within 90 days of the marriage date. I set the page down. You want me to quit my job? Mom's face was completely still. Terrence's family doesn't need you working. This isn't about what Terrence's family needs. This is about making sure I can't leave. I looked at Earl. His leather folder was closed. His hands were folded on top of it. He was watching me the way you watch a situation spiral and realize you're already inside it. I turned to Terrence. Did you write this clause, or did my mother? His jaw tightened. The terms are standard. Standard for what, exactly? No answer. I turned back to my mother. You pulled my bank balance from somewhere. You negotiated where I'd live. And you wrote a clause specifically designed to eliminate my ability to earn my own money, so I'd have no way out. I set the contract down in the center of the table like an exhibit in a courtroom. This isn't a marriage, Mom. This is a sale. That word sat in the room like a lit match dropped on dry wood. I looked at my father. He hadn't moved from the door all night. Hadn't said more than 2 words. Dad, how much do you owe the Hobbs family? His chin lifted. That's none of your business. It is directly my business. Because I'm how you're planning to pay it off. The room went dead still. Even the candles seemed to stop moving. Terrence looked at Raymond. Raymond looked at the floor. Mom's palm came down on the table. Don't you dare accuse your father. $1 million, I said. That's the number Marcus told me. A land development deal that fell apart. A payment that's been due since last spring. And instead of selling off the property or working out a payment plan, you decided to sell me. Raymond's arms dropped to his sides for the first time all night. Terrence stood up from the couch. I don't think that's inaccurate. Then correct me. He didn't. Earl rose from his chair, both hands gripping his folder. I think I need to reassess the situation. Sit down. My mother's voice broke high and sharp. I paid you. You will do your job. Ma'am. Earl held up one hand. If this is not a voluntary union, I cannot proceed. I will not proceed. He moved toward the front door. Raymond was still standing there. No longer blocking it with purpose, but blocking it with habit. With size. With the slow stubbornness of a man who's never learned to step aside. Nobody is leaving yet, Raymond said. Not loud. Almost tired. Earl stopped. Looked at the door. Looked at Raymond. Looked at me. And I watched something register on his face. The realization that he was now also being held in this house against his will. Mom pivoted again, voice shifting back to soft and wounded. Clara, look at what you're doing. You're embarrassing us in front of this man. In front of Terrence. Is this really who you are? I almost laughed. She was worried about embarrassment. In the middle of an ambush she had built from scratch. Outside, a car pulled into the neighbor's driveway. Headlights swept across the living room curtains. Mom's head snapped toward the window. Raymond closed those blinds. He crossed the room, pulled the cord. The blinds rattled shut. Then he returned to the door. I checked the clock again. 7:58 p.m. "Dad," I said, my voice completely even. "You are physically preventing 3 people from leaving this house. Do you know what that's called?" He didn't answer. In Tennessee, it's called unlawful restraint. It's a misdemeanor. And depending on the circumstances, it can be elevated to a felony. Raymond's hands, which had been hanging at his sides, curled slowly into fists. Not to threaten anyone, I know my father. It was the only way he knew how to hold himself together when the ground was shifting. Sighed, faint at first, then unmistakable, a siren. Getting closer. Then stopping. Right in front of the house. I set the contract down on the table. Centered it carefully between the flowers and the empty dinner plate. Then I stood up, looked at my mother, looked at my father, looked at Terrence Hobbs, who had driven 45 minutes to buy a woman with somebody else's debt, and I smiled. Not a smirk. Not a grin. Kind of smile that only comes when every single piece finally slides into place and you can see the whole board. "Mom." "Dad." My voice was so steady it didn't even feel like mine. "You really should have read what I filed yesterday." 3 seconds of silence. The longest 3 seconds that living room had ever held. "What did you file?" Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. I opened my purse. Pulled out 2 envelopes, clean, cream-colored, crisp. I placed the first one on the table. "This is an emergency protective order signed yesterday morning by a judge at the county courthouse. Prohibits both of you from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of me. Effective immediately." I placed the second envelope right beside the first. "And this is a formal complaint filed with Adult Protective Services, documenting years of pressure, emotional manipulation, guilt tactics, and control over my personal and financial decisions." The marriage contract was already on the table. Now there were 3 documents on that white tablecloth. 1 of theirs, 2 of mine. The room didn't breathe. Then Mom's phone on the kitchen counter buzzed with a notification from the county court system. Then Raymond's phone in his back pocket vibrated against the doorframe. And from outside, no longer distant, no longer maybe, came the sound of a siren that had already stopped. Right out front. Mom grabbed her phone off the counter with shaking hands. She tried her passcode twice before she got it right. I watched her face as she read the notification. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "What is this?" "What did you do?" Raymond pulled his phone from his pocket. "Read it slowly, the way he reads everything, lips moving slightly." And then I saw something on Raymond Bennett's face that I had never seen there before in 25 years. Fear. Terrence was already on his feet. "I haven't signed anything. I'm not a part of whatever this, I need to leave." For the first time all night, that flat, businesslike voice had a crack running straight through it. He wasn't worried about the wedding anymore. He was worried about himself. Earl saw his opening the second Raymond stepped away from the door to look at his phone. Earl moved fast for a 63-year-old man. He had the front door open and was through it before anyone could react. Blue and red lights came pulsing through the open doorway, washing across the white tablecloth, the gardenias, the contract, my mother's face. A patrol car sat running at the curb. I could hear Earl's voice outside, talking fast. Then footsteps on the porch. My mother looked at me. Not with anger, not yet. That would come later. Right now it was something different. Disbelief. The expression of someone who wrote every single line of the script and suddenly doesn't recognize the scene they're standing in. "Clara." Her voice cracked right down the middle. "You called the police on your own parents?" I didn't answer. The knock on the door answered for me. The officer was a woman. Mid-30s, dark ponytail, calm eyes that scanned the room in about 2 seconds flat. "Good evening. I'm Officer Reyes with the County Sheriff's Department. We received notification that an emergency protective order is active at this address." She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. I stepped forward. I'm Clara Bennett. I'm the one who filed the protective order. I was brought here under false pretenses and was physically prevented from leaving. Officer Reyes looked past me, took in the tablecloth, candles, the marriage contract, 2 envelopes. Then her eyes moved to Raymond, 3 feet from the open door, arms finally at his sides. Sir, did you prevent anyone from leaving this residence tonight? This is my house, Raymond said. That's not the question I asked. Earl's voice came from the porch behind her. I was also prevented from leaving. I'm a licensed officiant. I was told both parties had consented. That is clearly not the case. Reyes nodded once. She stepped inside. A second officer appeared behind her, younger, staying near the door. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I'll need to speak with each of you separately. Sir, if you'd step outside with my partner. Raymond looked at Reyes, then at my mother, then at me. He walked out the front door without a single word. His footsteps on the porch were heavy and slow. It was the first time in my life I watched my father leave a doorway because someone else asked him to. Officer Reyes turned to me. Her voice dropped to something gentler. You're safe now. Is there anything else you need? I shook my head. Then I said the truest thing I'd said all night. I just needed to be believed. In Millhaven, a police car on your street is news. A police car in your driveway with the lights still going is the kind of news that gets repeated at the coffee shop for 2 weeks straight. Mrs. Calloway from next door was already on her porch. Arms folded, phone in hand, not even pretending she wasn't watching. Across the street, a light came on at the Morrison house. Curtain moved at the corner house by the big oak tree. My mother saw all of it. She was standing at the living room window, jaw clenched so tight I could see the tension in her neck. Are you happy now? She turned to me, voice low and sharp. You have destroyed this entire family. The whole street is watching. I didn't destroy anything, Mom. I just let people see what's been happening. She flinched. A real flinch. Like the words had actual weight. Through the kitchen window, I watched Terrence get stopped by the second officer near his SUV. He'd tried to leave through the back door. I was just here as a guest, I heard him say, arms wide. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett contacted me. I came as a courtesy. 45 minutes of partnership, dissolved in 30 seconds of self-preservation. Officer Reyes was taking notes at the dining table. She'd placed the marriage contract inside an evidence bag. Sat on the white tablecloth like a patient on a stretcher. My mother, still at the window, whispered to no one. Everyone will know. The whole town. Yes, I said. They will. And for the first time in your life, you won't be able to control the story. Earl gave his statement on the front porch under the yellow porch light. He handed Officer Reyes his phone showing the email chain from Patricia. Date, time, payment confirmation. She'd sent him $350 through a mobile app. Subject line, Saturday ceremony, Bennett/Hobbs. She told me both parties were eager, Earl said. His voice was unsteady. She said her daughter was shy but excited that this was a family celebration. Reyes documented everything. Contract now in plastic. Timestamps. Earl's account of who sat where, what was said, the moment he tried to leave and couldn't. Then she turned back to me. Miss Bennett, I have the protective order on file. Your parents will be formally served with the terms. I also want you to know the unlawful restraint is being written up as a formal citation. It won't be an arrest tonight, but it will be on record. I handed her a printed copy of the protective order, the APS case number written on a sticky note, and then told her about the voice recording. I've been recording since I walked in. Riz paused. Looked at me, not surprised exactly, more like she was seeing me in a whole new light. That's admissible in Tennessee. One-party consent state. I nodded. Earl touched my arm gently before he left. Miss Bennett, I truly did not know. I am so sorry. I believe you, I said. He walked to his car, started the engine, and pulled away slowly, like a man trying not to make any more noise in a night that had already been much too loud. Reyes told my father he would be cited for unlawful restraint. Not jail, not tonight, but a formal record with his name and the date and a written description of what he did. I watched Raymond hear those words. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just stood on the front lawn under the dogwood tree he planted the year I was born, and something in the way he was holding himself just changed. The broad shoulders that had filled every doorway of my childhood seemed to narrow. The arms that had been folded like a shield all night hung loose at his sides. He looked at me through the open front door. Not angry. Not pleading. Something I had never seen from him before. Confused, like he was looking at a person he didn't recognize and couldn't quite figure out when that happened. I held his gaze. Didn't look away. Didn't give him the small apologetic nod he'd been trained to expect from me my whole life. Then I turned back inside. Mom was sitting at the dining table, in the chair they'd set out for me, the one with the pen placed neatly beside it. Candles had burned down, wax pooled on the white cloth. She was staring at the 2 envelopes I'd placed there, the protective order and the APS complaint, like they were something alive. This isn't over, Clara. I'll get a lawyer. Officer Reyes stepped back in. Ma'am, I'd strongly recommend that you do get an attorney for yourself. My mother looked at Reyes, then at the empty chair where Terrence had been sitting. Then she looked at me. And for the first time in my entire life, Patricia Bennett didn't have a single line prepared. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard in that house. The drive home was 45 minutes of nothing. I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't call Simone. Didn't call Marcus. Just drove, both hands on the wheel, headlights cutting through the dark stretch of Route 9 where the street lamps give out and it's just you and the trees. My hands started shaking somewhere around mile 12. They hadn't shaken all night. Not when Dad blocked the door. Not when Mom cried. Not when I laid the envelopes on the table. But now, alone in the car with no one to stay calm for, my body finally caught up with itself. I thought about my mother. Not the woman who had set that trap for me tonight. The other one, the one who used to French braid my hair so tight it would last 3 days. Who made chicken soup from scratch when I was sick. Who kept every single one of my drawings from kindergarten in a shoebox on the shelf in her closet. Both of those women are my mother. That's the part nobody ever prepares you for. The people who hurt you worst aren't strangers. They're the ones who know exactly where you're soft, because they were there when that softness was built. I pulled into my parking spot at 10:15 p.m., sat in the dark for a long while, then went inside, locked the door behind me, slid down the kitchen wall to the floor and cried, hard and ugly and loud, the way you only can when nobody's watching and you don't have to perform strength anymore. Simone called at midnight. You okay? I don't know yet, but I'm safe. I woke up on the kitchen floor Saturday morning to 26 missed calls. 11 from Mom. I could map her emotional arc just by the timestamps. Rapid fire at first, then longer gaps, then a cluster around 2 in the morning when the crying phase would have kicked in. 5 from Dad. No voicemails. Pure Raymond Bennett call, wait, hang up, repeat. Silence delivered in installments. 4 from relatives fishing for details. 2 from Marcus. I called him back first. You doing okay, baby? Tired, but okay. It's all over town, he said. Mrs. Calloway told the church ladies before breakfast. By noon, everyone on the north side of Millhaven knew there was a police car at your mama's house. 1 call from Terrence Hobbs' number. No voicemail. By the time I looked, the number was blocked. He'd already scrubbed it from his end. A text from my mother, long, single-spaced, composed like a legal brief full of blame and redirected hurt. I read the first line. You have destroyed your father and me. I cannot show my face anywhere. I hope you're satisfied with yourself. I screenshot it, added it to the evidence folder on my phone, filed it the way Simone had taught me. Date, time, content summary. It was automatic now, 3 years of practice. Marcus told me one more thing before we hung up. Your mama called Aunt Sharon this morning. Told her you've been psychologically manipulated by outside influences. That's the story she's going with. I wasn't surprised. Patricia Bennett doesn't lose. She rewrites. But this time there were too many witnesses. An officer's report. Court order. A voice recording on my phone. The story was already written and she didn't hold the pen. Call from Adult Protective Services came the following Thursday. A caseworker named Evelyn Marsh, professional, warm, thorough. She told me they'd opened a formal investigation based on my complaint and supporting documentation. Miss Bennett, your file is one of the most detailed we've received. The timeline, the screenshots, the witness statements that back it all up, it all helps. She asked if I could bring in the original notebook. I already submitted 48 photocopied pages with the protective order application, I said. But yes, I can bring the original. That would be ideal. She explained the process. Interviews with my parents, with neighbors, with anyone I'd listed as a witness to the pattern. Raymond and Patricia would receive formal notification by mail within 5 business days. Simone sent me an update the same afternoon. Raymond's unlawful restraint citation had been formally processed, a misdemeanor on record, which meant it would show up in any future background check or legal case involving the family. Earl Dutton had voluntarily submitted a written statement to APS, unprompted. He detailed everything, the emails, the payment, the moment he realized I hadn't consented, the moment Raymond blocked the door. Simone said he was cooperating fully because he was terrified of losing his officiating license. And Terrence Hobbs silent. According to Marcus, he'd told his father the arrangement was off. No fight, no explanation. He just shut it down. The $1 million debt was still there. Raymond still owed the Hobbs family. But the currency he'd tried to pay with, me, was permanently off the table. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from my parents' attorney. A formal request to throw out the emergency protective order, calling the entire incident a grossly exaggerated routine family disagreement. I forwarded it to Simone immediately. She read it to me over the phone in the tone she saves specifically for things that are both legally ridiculous and personally insulting. This is harassment, Clara. And it just added another exhibit to your file. 3 days after that, my mother called my workplace. She asked to speak with my supervisor. My manager, Brenda Cole, told me about it during my lunch break, her face careful and kind. Your mother called this morning. She said, and I'm quoting here, "My daughter is emotionally unstable and should not be trusted with any responsibilities." My stomach dropped. Brenda put her hand on my arm. I told her you are one of the most reliable people on this staff. And I told her that if she calls this office again, I will document it as workplace harassment. I thanked her. I don't think she knew what those words meant to me in that moment. Tricia was running out of levers. The church walking group had quietly stopped including her in the Saturday morning route. People at the grocery store were polite but brief. Millhaven is small enough that everyone knows, and polite enough that nobody says it to your face. Raymond called once. Short. I didn't know it was going to go this far. But you still blocked the door, Dad. Silence. Then the line disconnected. I told Simone that night over coffee. She looked at me with steady eyes. He's not sorry for what he did. He's sorry it didn't work. I wanted to argue with her. I couldn't. I've asked myself 100 times since that night, did I do the right thing? Calling the police to my parents' house. Filing against my own family. There are moments, usually late at night when everything gets too quiet, when I wonder if I was too hard on them. If I should have just walked out and never looked back instead of pulling the law into it. But then I remember the deadbolt clicking. Contract with my name printed in every blank. My dad's back against the door. If you were standing in my shoes that night, would you have called? I genuinely want to know. Tell me in the comments. I renewed the protective order for 6 months. Then one Sunday morning I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop and wrote an email to both of them. Short, clear, honest. No anger. No accusations. Just the truth. Mom, Dad, I love you. I need you to know that hasn't changed and I don't think it ever will. But I won't be in contact with either of you until 3 things happen. First, you complete a family counseling program with a licensed therapist. Second, you both acknowledge, out loud in your own words, exactly what happened on October 19th. Not a version of it. What happened? Third, you respect the boundaries I've set. Not because a court order requires it. Because you choose to. This isn't punishment. This is what I need to feel safe. I hope you'll do the work. But I'll understand if you don't. I read it twice. Hit send. Mom replied within 3 hours. 4 pages, single-spaced. She blamed Marcus for poisoning me against the family. She blamed my independence. She blamed modern culture. She blamed my apartment, my job, my boundaries. She blamed everything and everyone except the woman who had hired an officiant and pre-signed a marriage contract on behalf of her adult daughter. She never once said the words "I'm sorry." Dad didn't reply at all. I read her email halfway through. Then I archived it. Not deleted, I might need it someday. But I didn't finish it. There was nothing in those 4 pages I hadn't already heard 1,000 times before. A boundary isn't a wall. It's a door with a lock, and the key belongs to the person on the other side. They just have to be willing to reach for it. So far, neither of them has. Marcus and I have a new tradition now. Every Sunday morning, we meet at a diner halfway between our 2 towns, a place called Silver Fork with cracked vinyl booths, coffee that's way too strong, and pancakes the size of a dinner plate. He always gets there first. He always orders my coffee before I sit down. Last Sunday, he told me something he'd never told me before. About his own marriage, the one that ended quietly when I was 12 and nobody in the family ever fully explained. He told me his ex-wife used to go through his phone, time his drives to work, question every receipt. He told me he stayed for 13 years because the people around him, including my mother, kept telling him it was just how relationships work. I left when I was 45, he said, stirring his coffee. 13 years too late. He looked out the window at the parking lot. I recognized what your mama was doing to you because I lived inside a version of it. You're the first person in this family who had the nerve to name it out loud. I reached across the table and held his hand. You were the first person who ever told me I was allowed to say no. He squeezed back and smiled, a little sad, a little proud. Took me 13 years to learn that word for myself. I'm not telling you this story because I want your sympathy. I really don't. And honestly, sympathy wouldn't help much at this point anyway. I'm telling you this because 3 years ago, sitting in a parking lot with shaking hands and a notebook full of dates and screenshots, I needed someone to say what I'm about to say to you right now. Setting a boundary is not betrayal. Protecting yourself is not cruelty. And keeping a record of what's happening to you, writing it down, dating it, saving the proof, is not paranoia. It's preparation. You may never need it. But if you do, you will be so grateful it's there. My parents are not monsters. I need you to hear that. They're people who grew up inside a system that taught them that children are property, that obedience equals love, and that control equals safety. I understand where it comes from. But I can hold that understanding and still say it was wrong. Both things are true at the same time. They don't cancel each other out. I love them. I love them from this side of the boundary line, where I can breathe, where I can choose, where nobody gets to sign my name without my permission. The notebook is still in my nightstand drawer. I don't open it anymore. But I know it's there. and it reminds me every single day. I wasn't crazy. I was never crazy. My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 25 years old. And on a Saturday night in October, for the first time in my life, I walked out of my parents' house, not because I was told to leave, but because I chose to go. That's the difference. That's everything. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. That means more than you know. If you've ever had to draw a line with someone you love, you already understand how heavy that is and how necessary. Hit like if you think I made the right call. Drop a comment if you've got a story of your own. I read every single one, and you'd be surprised how many people in these comments are going through something similar right now. Subscribe and hit the bell if you want more stories like this. I'll see you there in the next one.